There is a particular kind of silence that only exists in the early hours before dawn. Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of everything holding its breath. I remember sitting on the cold stone steps of a monastery in the mountains, wrapped in a thin robe that was never quite thick enough for that hour, watching the darkness begin to soften at its edges. The trees were still. The birds had not yet spoken. And somewhere behind the walls, an old monk was preparing his final morning tea, though none of us knew it would be his last. He had lived 87 years. He had sat with thousands of sunrises. And he was leaving this world the way he had always moved through it, without urgency, without resistance, like water finding its way home to the sea. That morning changed the way I understood everything. Not because death arrived as a tragedy, but because it arrived as a teacher. And it said very quietly, "This is how you are supposed to live." To continue healing your body and soul through these ancient teachings, I invite you to join our path by subscribing to this sanctuary. What you are about to receive is not a lecture about mortality. It is an invitation to wake up inside your own life, to feel the ground beneath your feet again, to remember what matters before you are reminded by circumstance. The first insight death offers us is this: most of what we call urgency is not urgent at all. We live inside a storm of manufactured pressure. The inbox that must be cleared, the opinion that must be defended, the timeline that must be met. We move through our days like people who believe there is a fire somewhere, or always rushing towards something or away from something, rarely simply present in the room we are actually standing in. But when death draws close, whether it comes for someone we love, or brushes past us in the form of illness or loss, everything that felt urgent reveals itself to be negotiable. The argument with a friend that has lasted 3 months. The grudge carried so carefully for years. The dream postponed until the right moment arrives. In the presence of death, we suddenly see with terrible clarity that the right moment has always been now, and that we have been spending it preparing for a life we have not yet begun to live. The Zen teacher Shunryu Suzuki once said that in the beginner's mind there are many possibilities, but in the expert's mind there are few. Death returns us to the beginner. It strips away our certainty and our plans, our rehearsed identities, and leaves us standing in the raw simplicity of a single breath. Notice yours now. Feel the soft expansion of your chest. You are here. This moment is not preparation. This is the life. The second insight is that impermanence is not a problem to be solved. It is the very nature of beauty. There is an ancient Japanese practice called mono no aware, a phrase that carries within it a bittersweet recognition of the transience of all things. The cherry blossoms are not beautiful in spite of the fact that they fall. They are beautiful because they fall. We understand this intellectually, but we do not yet know it in our bodies. We spend enormous energy trying to hold things still. We photograph the meal before we eat it, as if capturing the image might preserve the experience. We cling to relationships that have already changed, to identities that no longer fit, to versions of ourselves that served us once, but no longer do. And in all this clinging, we miss the actual texture of what is here. A monk I once knew kept a single dried leaf on the windowsill of his meditation room. When a student asked why, he said, "Every morning I look at this leaf and remember that it was once fully alive, that it drank sunlight and moved in the wind, and that now it is resting in a different form. He said the leaf did not grieve its falling. Only the tree that held it too tightly suffered. Where in your life are you holding too tightly? Where are you trying to keep something still that is meant to move? The third insight is that grief is not weakness. It is love with nowhere to go. When we lose someone or something, or some version of ourselves that we depended on, the modern world often tells us to recover quickly, to process and integrate and move forward, as if grief were a malfunction rather than a profound human experience. Buddhism does not ask us to bypass our grief. It asks us to sit inside it with great tenderness, to feel the full weight of what we loved, because it is only in that full feeling that we begin to understand how deeply we are capable of connection. The Buddha himself wept when his close disciple Sariputta died. He did not perform invulnerability. He allowed the loss to move through him like weather. This is the practice. Not to become untouchable, but to become porous enough that life, including its losses, can pass through you without destroying you. Place one hand gently on your chest. Feel the warmth of your own skin. If there is grief living there, let it be acknowledged. It is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It is a sign that you have loved. The fourth insight is perhaps the most radical. Death is not your enemy. It is the thing that gives your life its shape. Imagine a painting with no borders, a melody that never resolves, a story that simply continued forever without change or consequence. Without an ending, there is no arc. Without finitude, there is no meaning. The Buddhist concept of Maranasati, or death awareness meditation, is not a morbid practice. It is a practice of profound gratitude. In some monasteries, monks were asked to contemplate their own death each morning before doing anything else. Not to become depressed or frightened, but to taste the preciousness of the day that followed. When a monk named Ajahn Chah was asked how he remained so peaceful while others around him suffered, he held up a glass and said, "To me, this glass is already broken. I enjoy it. I drink out of it. But I know that one day it will slip from my hand, or someone will knock it from the table, and I say, of course. When I understand that the glass is already broken, every moment I have with it is precious. This is the gift death offers. It makes the ordinary luminous. The morning coffee, the sound of rain, the weight of a hand placed in yours. These are not small things. These are the whole of it." The fifth insight is that the body knows what the mind refuses to accept. We are so accustomed to living from the neck up, analyzing and categorizing and narrating our experience, that we rarely drop into the deeper wisdom that lives below. But when death is near, the body speaks first. Something tightens in the throat. Something loosens in the chest. The hands go cold. The breath becomes shallow. This is not weakness. This is the body paying attention. And the practice of somatic awareness, of simply returning to the physical sensations of being alive, is one of the most direct paths to presence that exists. Right now, feel the weight of your body wherever you are sitting or lying. Feel the places where you are supported, the floor, the chair, the earth itself beneath all of it. Notice if there is anywhere you are holding tension, the jaw, the shoulders, the space between your eyebrows. You do not need to fix it. Simply notice. The body has been trying to tell you something. It has been patient. It will wait until you are ready to listen. The sixth insight is this. Most of us are not afraid of death itself. We are afraid of dying having never fully lived. This is the ache that wakes people at 3 in the morning. Not the fear of cessation, but the fear of reaching the end and realizing they had been an observer of their own life rather than a participant. The Zen tradition has a koan, a contemplative riddle, that asks, "What was your face before your parents were born?" On the surface, this seems like a riddle about identity, and it is. But it is also a question about authenticity. Before the world told you who to be, before the layers of approval and performance and careful self-construction accumulated, there was something original in you, something that wanted, that longed, that sensed its own direction. Death has a way of stripping all the layers back until that original face is visible again. The question is whether we are willing to look now, while there is still time to let it breathe and move and speak. What does your original face look like? What did you love before you learned to be practical about it? The 7th insight is that every ending is also a threshold. In the monastery, when someone died, there was no frantic activity. The community would sit together in the room where the person had been, sometimes for hours, in a silence that was not grief and not celebration, but something more ancient than either. The abbot once told me that death is a door, and that the wisest thing we can do is stand in its light and let it illuminate the room behind us. In Buddhist cosmology, the moment of death is not considered an end, but a transition, a releasing of one form so that something else can take shape. And whether or not you hold this as a literal belief, there is a psychological truth in it that is worth considering. Every time something in your life ends, a relationship, a chapter, a version of yourself, there is a threshold waiting. The tendency is to rush through it, to fill the space immediately with something new, to avoid the vulnerability of standing in the in-between. But the threshold is where transformation happens. It is the place between the exhale and the next inhale, the pause that allows the breath to mean something. Where in your life are you standing in a doorway right now? What would it mean to stand there a moment longer before rushing through? The 8th insight is that compassion for others begins with compassion for your own mortality. We are often hardest on the people we love most, impatient with their slowness, are frustrated by their limitations, quietly disappointed that they are not who we imagined they would be. But when we remember that they too are dying, not as a metaphor but as a literal truth, the whole texture of our relationship shifts. There is a Tibetan practice called Tonglen, in which you breathe in the suffering of another person and breathe out relief and ease. It is not about fixing the person or taking their pain. It is about allowing their experience to matter to you, to touch you, to close the distance between your heart and theirs. When I look at someone now, especially someone who is difficult or frightened or unkind, I try to remember that beneath every defended exterior is someone who is also carrying the knowledge of their own impermanence, someone who also wakes in the night and wonders if their life has meaning, or someone who also loves something they are afraid of losing. This does not excuse harmful behavior, but it changes the quality of how I meet them. It opens something. Try it now with someone in your life who has been difficult. Simply breathe and remember, they are also mortal. They are also trying. The 9th and final insight is the one the old monk on those cold stone steps gave me, without ever saying a word. He died the way he had lived, completely. Not a single withheld gesture. Not a single postponed kindness. Not a single love left unexpressed. After he passed, We went into his small room and found it almost completely bare. A robe, a bowl, a few worn books, and on the windowsill, a small pot of soil with a single green shoot pressing upward toward the light. He had planted something even at the very end, not because he expected to see it bloom, but because the planting itself was the point. This is the teaching. Not that death gives life meaning by threatening to take it away, but that a life lived in full awareness of its own impermanence becomes something extraordinary, not despite its finitude, but through it. The awareness of death does not shrink the world. It opens it. It makes you capable of greater tenderness, deeper attention, more courageous love. When you know the glass is already broken, you hold it with more care. When you know the morning is not guaranteed, you step into it with more reverence. When you know that the people around you are temporary, not permanent fixtures, but traveling companions moving through the same brief light, you begin to treat them as the gifts they actually are. So I want to leave you with this. Not a resolution, not a neat conclusion, but an invitation. The next time you find yourself rushing, stop for a single breath. The next time you find yourself avoiding something tender, ask whether you would still avoid it if you knew your time was measured. The next time someone you love does something that irritates you, remember the leaf on the windowsill. Remember the monk and his pot of soil. Remember that the cherry blossoms are not falling. They are becoming. Life is not a problem to be solved or a distance to be crossed. It is a series of moments, each one complete in itself, each one already whole. Death knows this. It has always known this, and it has been trying with infinite patience to teach us. You do not have to wait for loss to wake you. You can wake right now, in this breath, in this body, in this one unrepeatable, luminous, already breaking, already beautiful moment that is your life.